My name is Ella, and for most of my life, I felt like a side character in my own story. I was the quiet one, the girl who faded into the background during family reunions, the one who got overlooked at birthday parties, who didn't have many friends in school, and who preferred books over sleepovers. Growing up in a small town in Oregon, I lived with my adoptive parents, my Aunt Caroline and Uncle Richard. But I never called them Mom and Dad. It just didn't feel right. And I don't think they ever really wanted me to either. Caroline wasn't cruel, not exactly. But there was always something cold in her voice when she addressed me. Something clipped and formal. Like I was a guest staying too long. She made sure I had food, clothes, and went to school, but love? Affection? Forget it. If I ever tried to hug her when I was little, she'd stiffen like a statue. I learned pretty quickly not to try again. Uncle Richard was quieter. He mostly kept to himself, working long shifts at the auto shop. He never raised his voice, but he never raised his eyes to meet mine either. It was like I was a responsibility neither of them had asked for, and they were just waiting for me to turn 18 so they could finally breathe again. The only person who made me feel like I mattered was my grandma, my Aunt Caroline's mother, Ruth. Grandma Ruth didn't live with us, but she visited often. She was soft-spoken but sharp-witted, with eyes that seemed to see everything, especially the things people tried to hide. And when she looked at me, I felt seen. Really seen. Like I wasn't just the adopted girl, or Ella, the quiet one. She used to brush my hair gently, the way I imagined real moms did. She told me stories about her childhood, baked my favorite lemon cookies, and insisted I sit beside her at family gatherings even when Caroline rolled her eyes. Once, when I was around 11, I overheard Caroline saying to Ruth, "You spoil that girl too much. She needs to toughen up. Life isn't going to be kind to someone like her." Grandma just responded, "Maybe not, but I can be kind. And maybe that's enough." I never forgot those words. But despite Ruth's warmth, I still couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't belong. I never looked like Caroline or Uncle Richard. My hair was darker, curlier. My skin tone slightly deeper. I used to stare at the mirror and wonder who I really was. Why had my biological parents given me up? Where did I come from? Whenever I asked, Caroline would shut it down with a cold, "That's not your concern," or "Be grateful you have a roof over your head." And I learned to bury my questions. By the time I reached high school, I was practically invisible. I didn't have many friends, and I was okay with that. I kept to myself, did well in school, and worked part-time at the town library. It was quiet there, and I liked the order of it, rows of stories with beginnings, middles, and ends. So different from the messy unknown of my own life. Grandma Ruth's health started declining when I was 16. She had some kind of heart issue, and Caroline didn't like me visiting her too often. She said it was too much for Mom, and that I was being clingy. But I went anyway, sneaking out after work or school just to sit beside Ruth's bed and hold her hand. She'd always smile when she saw me. Her voice got weaker with time, but she still found ways to comfort me even when she was the one hurting. I remember one of the last real conversations we had. I was 17, and she'd just woken up from a nap. She looked at me, her eyes a little misty, and said, "Ella, sometimes the truth takes time to show itself. But when it does, promise me you won't run from it. Promise me you'll be brave." I didn't know what she meant then. I thought maybe she was just talking about life in general. I nodded and said, "I promise." She smiled. "Good girl. You've always been stronger than they think." She passed away 3 months later. The funeral was small. Caroline was cold and composed as ever, but I saw something flicker in her eyes, panic maybe, or guilt. She didn't cry. Uncle Richard stood quietly at her side, expression unreadable. I sat alone in the back row of the church pews, holding the last letter Grandma Ruth ever wrote me. It was sealed with my name written in her familiar cursive on the front, but I hadn't opened it yet. I couldn't. Not that day. After the funeral, Caroline packed up Ruth's belongings fast, too fast. It was like she couldn't wait to erase her. I offered to help, but she refused. Said it was family business. I guess I wasn't family enough. But then, a week later, everything changed. Caroline asked me to go to Ruth's house to help clean out some of the jewelry boxes for donation. She said, "Take what you want. Most of it's just junk." Her tone was dismissive, like none of it mattered. So I went. Alone. The house felt empty in a way that broke something inside me. The kitchen still smelled faintly like lemon and cinnamon. Her bedroom was neat, the bed still made with her floral quilt. I moved slowly, like I was walking through a memory. I found the jewelry box on her dresser. It was the old wooden one she'd had forever, dark cherry wood with a tiny lock that had rusted with time. When I opened it, I expected to find her usual things, a few brooches, old rings, a locket or two. But hidden beneath the false bottom, a part I didn't even know existed, was a small envelope. It was addressed to me. Hands trembling, I opened it. And that's when I found it. Not just a letter, but a truth that would unravel everything I thought I knew about who I was, and who had hated me most. The letter was written in Ruth's familiar, careful handwriting, slightly shaky near the end, like she'd been struggling but determined to get the words out. My heart pounded as I unfolded the pages. My fingers trembled. I didn't know it then, but in the next 3 minutes, everything I believed about my life would unravel. It began simply. "My sweet Ella, if you're reading this, then I'm already gone. And I'm sorry for the burden I'm about to place on your shoulders. But you deserve the truth. You always have. I wanted to tell you so many times. But I was afraid. Afraid it would destroy everything. Maybe I should have told you earlier. Maybe I was selfish. But there's no more time for maybe." I stopped reading, my eyes already blurring with tears. I could feel my heart in my throat. What could she possibly be leading to? I kept reading. "Ella, you were never adopted from a stranger. You're not just a distant relative, like Caroline told you. The truth is, you are my granddaughter by blood, not Caroline's daughter, but her twin sister Margaret's. Your mother, Margaret, was my youngest daughter. She was wild, impulsive, and deeply emotional. When she got pregnant at 19, she was terrified. She didn't tell anyone at first, not even me. The father was a boy from town who left her as soon as he found out. She was ashamed. She wanted to keep you, but Caroline, she had other ideas. Caroline always thought Margaret got away with too much. She resented her for being the free spirit. They were twins, but so different. And when Margaret told Caroline about you, everything changed. Caroline manipulated her. She told Margaret she'd ruin her life if she kept the baby. She told her she'd help raise you herself, out of pity. But when you were born, Caroline did something I never forgave her for. She convinced Margaret to disappear. I blinked. What? My brain couldn't catch up with the words fast enough. Margaret was heartbroken. She didn't want to give you up. But she was scared, and Caroline used that fear against her. Told her she'd ruin your life too. She claimed it would be best if no one knew the truth, that you should grow up thinking you were just an adopted niece from a faraway cousin. And Margaret, she vanished. I don't even know where she went. She left town and never contacted me again. I could barely breathe. My eyes raced across the page. I tried to raise you myself. I wanted to, but Caroline wouldn't allow it. She said she and Richard were more stable, that I was too old. She took you in and raised you without love. I saw how she treated you, Ella. I saw the way she looked at you, as if she were punishing you for your very existence. And it broke my heart every single day. That's why I did my best to be there. To make sure you felt seen, loved. Because you are. You always have been. Even when everyone else pretended not to notice. I didn't realize I was crying until the tears soaked through the thin paper. Ella, here's what you really need to know. Everything I own, I leave to you. You are my only true heir. It's already been written into my will, filed with my lawyer. There will be a reading soon. When it happens, you'll hear this truth spoken out loud. People may get angry, Caroline most of all. But don't be afraid. You have every right to stand in that room as who you are, not an orphan, not a charity case, but as the granddaughter of Ruth Whitmore and the daughter of Margaret Whitmore. My heart, my girl, my blood. The last words were underlined. Never let anyone tell you that you don't belong. You're not a mistake. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are loved, Ella. And the truth is finally yours. Grandma Ruth. The room around me spun. My head fell into my hands and I wept. I wept for the mother I never knew. For the lies I'd been fed. For every time Caroline made me feel small and unwanted. And for every time I believed her. I wasn't just some kid they took in out of obligation. I was their blood. And Caroline had lied to everyone. Even Richard, maybe. I wasn't sure. But I knew one thing. Whatever kindness she showed me growing up was a facade. She resented me. Because I was the living reminder of the sister she hated. I spent the next few hours in Grandma's room, reading the letter over and over again until I had it memorized. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to scream, to confront Caroline right then and there. But something told me to wait. So I went home. I hid the letter in my desk drawer and said nothing. And then, a few days later, the lawyer called. He was organizing the formal reading of Ruth's will. I remember sitting on the edge of the stairs, eavesdropping as Caroline answered the call. Her voice was tense. Yes, we'll be there, of course. She hung up without a word to me. But when she turned, I saw something in her eyes. Not grief. Not sadness. Fear. She knew what was coming. The day of the will reading felt like walking into the eye of a storm. The air in the car was suffocating. Caroline sat in the driver's seat. Her grip on the steering was so tight her knuckles turned white. Richard sat silently beside her, staring out the window, avoiding everyone, including me. And I sat alone in the back seat, holding Ruth's letter in my pocket like it was a shield. We pulled up to the lawyer's office, a small, brick building near downtown with ivy crawling up the sides. I recognized it from when Grandma Ruth used to take me out for Sunday brunch. It felt like her spirit was watching over me as I stepped out of the car. Inside, we were greeted by Mr. Halpern, Ruth's longtime lawyer. He was older, bald with deep smile lines, but today he looked somber. Thank you all for coming, he said. Please, have a seat. We filed into a small conference room with a long oak table. Other family members had gathered too, cousins, great aunts, people I barely knew. Some offered me polite nods. Others ignored me entirely. I was still just the adopted girl in their eyes. Until now. Mr. Halpern opened a leather folder, cleared his throat, and began reading. As stipulated in the final will and testament of Ruth Marie Whitmore, I, Ruth Marie Whitmore, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath the following. He started with the smaller items, donations to the church, a scholarship fund for the local school, a few antiques to distant relatives. Then, after a pause, he looked up and read the next part slowly. To my granddaughter, Ella Margaret Whitmore, I leave my entire estate, including my home, financial assets, personal belongings, and all properties in my name. The room went silent. Dead silent. Every head in the room turned toward me. Caroline's face froze. Richard blinked slowly, clearly stunned. My heart felt like it had stopped altogether. Mr. Halpern continued. For those who may be unaware, Ella is the biological daughter of my youngest daughter, Margaret Whitmore, who entrusted her care to this family under difficult circumstances. It is my wish that Ella be granted all rights, privileges, and inheritances due to a direct descendant. That was the moment Caroline snapped. What kind of sick joke is this? She barked, rising to her feet. Ella's not Margaret's daughter. She's adopted, barely even family. Mr. Halpern raised a hand calmly. Mrs. Bennet, I assure you, this will was verified, signed, and witnessed in accordance with Oregon state law. If you'd like to contest it, you are within your rights, but she forged this, Caroline hissed. Ruth was confused. Ella probably manipulated her. Now everyone was looking between the two of us. My hands shook. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want a scene. I just wanted the truth to matter. So I stood, and I pulled the letter from my pocket. This is what Grandma Ruth left me, I said, my voice trembling. She wrote it before she died. She explains everything. About Margaret, about me, about how you forced her to give me up. Caroline's face went pale. Richard stood slowly. Is that true? He asked his wife, barely above a whisper. She didn't answer. She didn't even look at him. Her eyes were locked on me, like a predator cornered for the first time. Even if it's true, she said, her voice low and venomous, you don't deserve any of it. You were a mistake. That was it. That one sentence echoed through the room like a thunderclap. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I looked her straight in the eyes and said, you knew I was your sister's daughter. And you spent my whole life punishing me for it. Everyone was still. Even the cousins who had never spoken to me were wide-eyed now, like they were seeing something real for the first time. Richard turned to Caroline. Did you know? She stayed silent, and that silence was her answer. The rest of the whole reading was a blur. People whispered, exchanged looks, and drifted out in stunned silence. Mr. Halpern handed me a separate folder with paperwork, keys, and the official documents declaring me the heir. I took them with shaking hands. Caroline stormed out without another word. Richard lingered for a moment, like he wanted to say something, but then he just nodded and walked away. And I was left standing in a quiet room, holding the truth in one hand and my entire future in the other. I went home, my home now, alone. The house felt different, like it had exhaled. Like Ruth was still there, whispering, you made it, sweetheart. You stood tall. That night, I sat in her armchair, the one where she used to read me fairy tales, and cried until I couldn't breathe. Not because I was sad, but because, for the first time in my life, I was free. Free from the lies. Free from the guilt. Free to finally figure out who I really was. And I knew what I had to do next. I was going to find Margaret, my real mother. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? My mind was spinning with everything, Ruth's letter, Caroline's breakdown, the liar's stunned face, and that one awful sentence. You were a mistake. I repeated it in my head, not to hurt myself, but to remind myself that she was wrong. That I wasn't a mistake. I had proof now. I had a name. Margaret Whitmore. My mother. And I needed to find her. The next morning, I sat at Ruth's old desk, surrounded by boxes I hadn't opened yet. I pulled out my laptop and started searching, first on Google, then through public records. At first, nothing useful came up. Margaret Whitmore wasn't exactly a rare name, and she had disappeared nearly 18 years ago before social media really took off. But Ruth had always been a keeper of things. She didn't throw out anything with even the smallest sentimental value. So I started digging through her drawers, her journals, her old files. That's when I found it, an address book. Not digital. Not fancy. Just a small, worn leather-bound book filled with handwritten names, numbers, and addresses. Under the W tab, I found this. Margaret W. P.O. Box 1192 Ashland, or, my heart skipped. Ashland was 3 hours away. Was this current? Or some outdated note from decades ago? I didn't know. But I had to try. I packed a bag, grabbed the letter and the keys to Ruth's car, and hit the road. It was a quiet drive, surrounded by tall pines and winding roads. The kind of trip that gives you too much time to think. What if she didn't want to see me? What if she had a whole new family now? What if she'd forgotten me completely? When I pulled into the small town post office, my stomach twisted. It was one of those quaint little buildings with a faded flag outside and a bell over the door. Inside, I approached the front desk. An older woman in her 60s looked up from a stack of envelopes. Can I help you, sweetheart? I tried to keep my voice steady. I'm looking for someone. I think she has a P.O. box here. Margaret Whitmore? Box 1192? She squinted. Well, we can't give out customer information, I'm afraid. I understand, I said quickly. I think she might be my mother. I'm not here to hurt anyone or cause trouble. I just want to know if she's okay. If she still lives around here. The woman's expression softened. Margaret, she repeated, almost to herself. She comes by once a week. Keeps to herself. Quiet, doesn't talk much. My breath caught. She was still here. The woman glanced around, then lowered her voice. She usually picks up her mail Friday mornings. Around 9. That's the best I can tell you. I thanked her a dozen times and left, my heart racing. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I stayed in a small motel on the edge of town, staring at the ceiling, wondering what I'd say. Would I tell her I was Ella? That I'd read Ruth's letter? Would she slam the door in my face? The next morning, I stood outside the post office at 8:45 a.m., nerves eating me alive. At 9:02, a small, older car pulled into the parking lot, and from it stepped a woman, tall, lean, her long auburn hair streaked with gray, tied in a loose braid. Her face was tired, lined with years of quiet pain. But there was something familiar in the way she moved. Something that stirred a memory I didn't even know I had. She walked toward the building, sorting through her keys. I stepped forward. "Margaret?" I said. She froze, turned slowly. Our eyes met. Her expression shifted, confused, guarded. Then, something flickered. A tremble. Her mouth opened like she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. "It's me," I whispered. "Ella." Her face crumpled. She stumbled back a step, one hand covering her mouth. "Oh my God," she choked. "It's really you." The next moment, she was crying. So was I. We stood there like statues until she stepped forward and pulled me into her arms. "I'm so sorry," she kept repeating. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted to leave you. I never stopped thinking about you. I didn't know where you were. Caroline never told me anything. She said I had to go, that I'd ruin your life." I pulled back, looking into her eyes. "Grandma told me everything." She nodded, tears still falling. I was young and scared and weak. I let her manipulate me, and I've hated myself every day since. We sat in her car and talked for hours. She told me everything. How Caroline pressured her. How she tried writing letters but had them returned. How she came back to town once when I was 7 just to watch me walk to school from afar. And how she wept the entire drive home. "I thought maybe you were better off," she whispered. "But I was wrong. So wrong." "I always felt like something was missing," I said. "But now, I think I finally found it." She looked at me with such raw love it hurt. That day, I didn't just find my mother. I found a piece of myself that had been missing for 17 years. After that first meeting, Margaret, my mom, insisted I stay with her for a few days. Her apartment was small and modest, tucked above an old bookstore in downtown Ashland. But it felt like a home. More than the cold, pristine house I'd grown up in ever did. She had photos on her walls, places she'd traveled, sketches of wildflowers, and even a painting she said reminded her of me, a girl standing at the edge of a lake, staring into the horizon. She bought it years ago, not even knowing why. But now she said it made sense. The first night, we sat on her couch and looked through a showbox of memories she kept, old journal entries, a tiny pink sock she said was mine from the hospital, a folded-up picture of Ruth holding me as a newborn, taken the day I was born. She'd held onto it all. Even when she left, even when she thought she might never see me again, she never forgot. And neither did I, not really. I used to dream of a woman with warm eyes brushing my hair. I thought it was just something my imagination made up. But it was her. Some part of me had always remembered her. The next few days passed like a dream. We took walks in Lithia Park, talked for hours over coffee, laughed until we cried, and cried until we laughed. It wasn't perfect. There was pain, regret, awkward silences, but it was real. It was healing. One morning, while we were flipping through Ruth's letter again, Margaret asked, "What are you going to do about the house?" "About Caroline?" I stared out the window, thinking. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to forget any of it ever happened. Just start over. But another part of me feels like I need to face her. Not for revenge. Just to finally say what I couldn't all those years. Margaret nodded slowly. "If you do, just promise me one thing." "What?" "Don't become like her. Don't let bitterness take root. The truth is power, but what you do with that power, that's what matters most." I promised her I wouldn't. A few days later, I returned to Ruth's house. My house now. It looked the same, but it felt different. I was no longer the invisible girl passing through its halls. I was the rightful heir. The granddaughter. The daughter of the woman they tried to erase. I didn't have to wait long before Caroline came storming up the driveway. She didn't knock. She never did. She flung the door open, eyes blazing, lips tight. You're really going to play this out, aren't you? Take the house? Take everything? After all I did for you? I stood calmly, letter in hand. All you did for me? You mean lying to me my whole life? Telling me I was lucky you even took me in? Her jaw clenched. You told my mother, your twin, that she wasn't good enough to raise me. You made her disappear. You made me feel like I was nothing. You were nothing, she spat before she could stop herself. Just a consequence of Margaret's stupidity. The words landed like poison, but I didn't flinch. I'm not here to argue, I said. I'm here to tell you that I know the truth. Ruth gave it to me. She gave me everything. And you? I paused, locking eyes with her. You lost everything the second you let your hate matter more than your family. Caroline's face twisted with something between fury and heartbreak. For a moment, I saw past her anger. I saw the cracks, the jealousy, the pain. She wasn't just cruel, she was wounded. A girl who grew up in the shadow of a sister she could never control. But it didn't excuse what she did. I don't hate you, I said softly. But I'm done letting you control any part of my life. She stared at me for a long time. Then, without a word, she turned and walked out of the house. And I closed the door behind her. That was the last time I saw Caroline. But not the last time I saw Richard. A week later, he came by quietly, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes full of shame. I didn't know, he said. I believe you, I replied. I should have paid more attention. I should have asked questions. I just followed her lead. I'm sorry. There was a long silence between us. Then I said, it's never too late to stop being silent. He nodded. You turned out better than both of us deserved. And with that, he left. I didn't hate him either. Hating them wouldn't give me back what I lost. But telling the truth would. And in the months that followed, I finished high school and enrolled in college with a scholarship Ruth had set aside years ago. I opened the house to Margaret whenever she wanted to visit, and slowly, we built a relationship, one rooted in honesty, even when it was hard. I turned Ruth's study into a writing room and began journaling everything that had happened. The secrets, the silence, the truth that finally set me free. And one day, I sat down and wrote this. My whole life, I thought I was just the quiet, adopted girl no one really noticed. But the truth is, I was always more than that. I was loved. I was wanted. I was someone's daughter, someone's granddaughter, someone's legacy. And now, I'm someone who speaks up, because silence doesn't protect you. Truth does. The world hadn't changed. But I had. And for the first time in my life, I felt whole.